The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here. Welcome to another episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. In today's episode, we're going to dive into how QuoteWorks continues to power the MSP quoting by integrating today's leading PSAs and CRMs. All the tools that we use, they evolve, and keeping your trusted quoting platform connected to those systems like Autotask, ConnectWise, Kaseya, Salesforce, HubSpot, and now Halo PSA is key. We're going to break down how these integrations improve visibility, reduce manual work, and keep your sales process running smoothly. And with that being said, I'm going to bring in our guest. Got Brian Laufer, the Vice President of QuoteWorks. How you doing today, Brian?
Great. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing awesome. Are you keeping yourself busy?
Always am.
Kind of a dumb question as entrepreneurs, right? I mean, there's never a dull moment. We're always busy, and that's what keeps us going, though, right?
Exactly. That and going out and
Yeah,
meeting people at different events.
exactly. So, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is, of course, your new integration with Halo PSA, which is great to hear. You guys continue to, look for those integrations to be able to support more and more MSPs. Before we jump into that latest integration, though, I want to talk a little about quoting tools in general. Now, I think most PSAs and CRMs attempt to provide some type of quoting functionality, but often they're falling short in many areas. And I guess my first question for you is, why is that?
I mean, the easiest answer is basically because that's not, where the focus area is. I mean, that PSA tool is meant for, ticketing and keeping track of your billing and that sort of thing. It's not meant for the quoting process. The quoting process is messy. Um, and
Yeah,
it does not the PSA does not like messy. And what I mean by that is, in order to quote a product, typically within that PSA, the item has to already exist, right?
right.
And especially if we're talking about like physical products, those products from Dell or HPE or any of those other manufacturers, those change not only on a weekly basis but sometimes on a daily basis, and doesn't
Yeah,
mean that that sale is actually going to close. So that means if you're adding it to your PSA just to quote it, you may not have actually ever actually sold that item, and now you're clouding up your or plugging up your PSA
yeah,
tool.
yeah, absolutely. And so when you have a dedicated quoting tool, what are those overall benefits?
Yeah, I mean, so really the main focus is going to be the fact that we're dedicated not just to the quoting process, but we're dedicated to the entire sales process from end to end. So when it comes to those integrations with your distributors, for instance, we have those direct integrations. So you're not going to have to go out to the different websites, for like Ingram Micro or TD Synnex. You'll have all of that pricing information and availability on one screen. And some of the PSAs, they have some of that functionality, but it's not as streamlined, we'll say,
Yeah.
as you'd want it
Yep.
to, as being sales focused, as opposed to I'm a tech and I need to go ahead and add an item to a ticket sort of thing, which is totally different than having to provide a sales document to your customer.
Right. Yeah, and I will, I'm going to date myself, but I'm not involved in the MSP as I was way back in the days, and I mean I do remember the quoting headaches of you're breaking out a spreadsheet, and you're listing out what the parts you need, and then you're logging into each of your distributors and you're checking who has number one availability, what each one has for pricing, And also too, like the location, because each distributor has different warehouses throughout the country, and you might find a product that's cheaper, but then all of a sudden you realize it's, I'm in Michigan, but that part's in California, and we know it's going to take longer to get to us. So it's like, you know, having a tool like QuoteWorks made life so much easier because it was like a magic wand,
Exactly.
for, to illustrate or give an analogy. So
Well, and the thing too is, the product has evolved quite a bit since you'd used it last.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
when you do a search, you can do a search for, a generic start by a laptop, for instance. Then you can narrow it, kind of like you're shopping on Amazon or any other, website. You can go ahead and start narrowing it down. It needs to have at
yeah,
least 16, gig of RAM. It needs to have at least a terabyte hard drive. It needs to not only exist, but it needs to be sold by one of my distributors, and it needs to have had stock within the last 24 hours. And then you
right,
can narrow it down from there, and then see it by warehouse, like you were saying as well.
yeah. Yeah, and then just the whole process of being able to send that to the client, so that they get a nice professional looking document, quote that shows them everything that's on there, giving them the ability that, if you add some add-ons, because we should always take a look at, how can we upsell?
Exactly.
And so we might throw some additional things in there, like some, upgraded wireless keyboards, and if they want to, delete something from it, ads, take something off, whatever the case may be, it just makes that process easier. And, and of course they can accept that quote right away. You know, just, it just streamlines it, right? I mean, it, it's like, magic again. I'll go back to magic. It's magic. It's the magic wand.
Right, and and the thing that's really great about the way that, a quoting tool is going to be able to provide that interactive quote to the customer is, not only can you allow them to, change the quantities or remove items or select different options, but you can also specify which ones they can't do that with. So
Yeah.
you have full
Right.
control over that as far as what you want to allow them to do. So you could give them a static document, or you could give them those upsell items, or you could even, like you said, allow them to remove items as well, and then
Yeah.
accept it like you said, and then even right from after they accept it, they can provide that down payment or the full payment amount as well.
Yep. Absolutely. So, we know, the PSAs that are out there, you guys do a lot of integrations, and I think over time, you've just continued to, add, as the PSA market has grown, you've looked for those. You have a new integration with Halo PSA,
Mhm.
and I want to learn a little bit more about, essentially what prompted you to write this integration with Halo?
Yeah. So, if we could start a little bit further back, and talk about, our integrations with CRMs to begin with. That's really where our we started from. That's why a lot of people know about us, because they were using some other CRM tool back in the day, whether that be, like a Salesforce.com or a HubSpot or something like that. And then, from there, the need for a PSA evolved, and that's when the PSAs actually approached us to start writing integrations to them. And
Oh,
that's how we
nice.
got introduced into the PSA market, because, we've been integrating with like ConnectWise and Autotask now for, I mean, it's going on 20 years. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But when it comes to those integrations, we've learned, the workflow that's important, what makes sense for our customers, what to integrate with, what not to integrate with. And so based on that feedback, we get, integration requests all the time for different PSAs. A new flavor, it pops up every couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and we have to
Yeah.
be smart with what we do. We
Right.
can't just, dedicate development time into just that next new thing that may or may not actually blossom.
Yep.
So we listen to our customers, and the biggest one on the block that people wanted was Halo. And
Okay.
we were not the first to write the integration, I'll admit that. But what we like to do is just make sure that PSA or that CRM or whatever the integration is going to be around,
Makes
because
sense.
we're going to be around as well. We've been
Yeah.
around for almost 35 years now, so it's one of those things that we have to be very careful of and cognizant of whenever we spend that development time, because we're not just writing a simple integration, we're writing a full-fledged integration, integrating to the major parts to every single aspect of that PSA tool. So what we did, we wrote the integration, and we didn't just limp along. What we did was we made it so it did everything that every other PSA tool does as far as our
Okay.
integration is concerned. And we did that from a couple of different perspectives. One, listening to our customers, obviously, that's super important.
Yeah.
And two, comparing it to our other integrations. And then three, do a little market research, see what everybody else is doing too.
Right. Yeah.
So,
You
we
have
didn't want, yeah, exactly. And so we didn't want to come onto the market and be like, okay, so now we have this integration and it doesn't do this, 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 and this, right?
Yeah.
So that is really what ended up happening. We went ahead and released the initial release at the end of last year with version 25, and that really just got us into the market, allowed people to test things out, allowed us to get some feedback and some things saying, well, Halo's a little bit different than, say, a ConnectWise or an Autotask, because
Yep.
it's based out of the UK. I don't know if
Okay.
you know, but addresses are a little different in the UK.
Right. Right.
So you
Yeah.
have to do some mapping things and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. And so, we had some learning aspects going on, and based on the feedback from not only our customers but also from Halo, we were able to really come out with this fully rounded integration that people have been wanting.
That's awesome. And so it's really not as easy as it seems, right? To bring on a new integration.
Oh, no, no. I mean, an integration at a base level for a CRM for us is going to take at least 2 months, but with a PSA tool, it's going to be looking at 3 to 6 months to get it
Oh,
all the way integrated. And the other thing too that's different about us than a lot of other quoting tools is not only do we have the web-based application, but we also have the desktop application as well. So when we write the
okay.
integration, now we're writing it. We write it in a way that it works for both, so that the business like the business logic is the same whether you're on desktop or web, but the interface obviously is going to be different.
Right. So when we take a look at, for somebody that's already a QuoteWorks customer,
Mhm.
um, you know, what needs to be done as far as purchasing or subscribing to
Yep.
be able to have access to that Halo integration?
Yeah, so if you're already using QuoteWorks and you're already on like the corporate edition, which is what's required for the PSA integrations, and you're current on maintenance, you don't have to buy anything else.
Oh,
Basically, at that point, you have the ability to integrate with any of the CRMs or PSAs that we integrate with, and we have over 15 different integrations at this point.
so if MSP is working with one PSA right now and they decide that they want to make a change for whatever reason, it's pretty easy to make that changeover.
Definitely. And the great thing is like, say, we'll stay away from a PSA name. Well, say you're
Yeah.
coming from
Yeah.
Outlook. You're coming from Outlook, and
Right.
that's what you're
Right.
doing everything with. And you did a quote with that. The customer came from them originally, and that customer now does not already exist in Halo. Well, we have a button that you can press, and it'll automatically create that customer now inside of Halo. And then when you save, it'll automatically create that opportunity with that customer, all the line items that were on that quote, and without having to do anything else. And it's all ready to go inside of Halo, linked to that quote and quote works.
Okay. That's awesome. And so when we talk about these integrations, I mean integrations is a kind of a tricky word because it can mean many different things.
Mhm.
So when I create a quote, when I'm in QuoteWorks and I create a quote, when do I see it in Halo? Is it pretty much instant? When I'm going over there, how does that process look?
Yeah, so there's two different schools of thought when it comes to integrations. There's the thought of, well, we can go ahead and say, oh, we're going to go ahead and batch these in the background and go ahead and have them created, and eventually they'll sync up to Halo or whatever the integration is. Or there's what we do, and as soon as you say save, it's instantly inside of Halo. So you don't have to
Okay.
worry about those batches happening, and everything is happening in real time. So if you say, I've created that opportunity, and you're talking to somebody else in your organization, maybe on the other side of the country, that's looking at that opportunity, they can see that opportunity with that quote already there. They don't have to wait that hour for that to synchronize up.
Okay. And so when you're sending a quote then to the client, is that coming from Halo or the PSA, or is it coming from QuoteWorks?
Yeah, so that's actually coming from QuoteWorks, and we're using Quote Valet to do that. And that's what allows the customer, to have that interactive quote. But the cool
Yeah.
thing is that that link that we send that customer, it's going to be in that email that gets logged in the PSA, as well as a shortcut to that link in the PSA as well, so you can see exactly what the customer was sent as well.
Okay. Excellent. And so another thing that I wanted to ask you about is the quoting integration. Why is quoting integration important for an MSP that uses that PSA? I know we talked a
Yes.
little bit about it, but I just want to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it comes back to that dedicated focus, as well as, being able to make sure that as an MSP, I have the tools that I need to be successful. If you're not using a quoting tool at all, most likely you're using Word or Excel or some variation of that, or you're using a PSA tool. But it's not going to be flexible enough for you, and you're going to be spending so much time and just finding the different products and services that you need to sell. Whereas with a quoting tool, everything is going to be integrated. It's going to be streamlined, and you're going to have transparency across the entire organization as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is just a critical thing because the timed quote is so important. You let's say you went and did a QBR or a TBR, and you talked about doing a hardware rotation plan and doing some upgrades, and and they're fired up and they're like, "Yep, this makes sense. Let's do it." And if it takes you a week or two to get them a quote, they might have lost that excitement and that interest in making the decision. Whereas if you can get back to the office and you can start building it out right away and get it over to them within a couple hours, that makes the world of difference because you're building off of that interest they have, and otherwise it's squirrel, right? They see
Right.
something else, they see something else shiny, and they're like, "Hey, let's spend money over here instead." And and also just the fact that creating quotes can be daunting if you're doing it in a manual way. And the last thing you want to do is get back to the office and say, "I gotta create a quote."
Exactly.
you know,
Well, and the other thing too is, a lot of the things that we're doing as MSPs, they can be somewhat templated as well. And
yeah,
so you can start from a template, add in that special sauce that you need for that one particular sale,
yep,
to close it. So it doesn't have to be daunting, because you already have that ready to go. And and for those things that might take that extra bit of time, having that integration with the different distributors, whether it be a hardware distributor, or even a SaaS distributor, having those integrations go a long way to making it so it's less painful.
yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because on our weekly MSP discussion group calls, I've heard MSPs that are QuoteWorks partners that talk about creating those templates, and
Yep.
where they'll create a template where they have the top three desktops and top three laptops that they use, and they have them built into that templated quote, and then they go in and they just remove the ones that they're not going to quote for them, put in the quantities they need for what they're going to quote, they add their labor, any kind of add-ons, and bam, they have their quote, and they talk about how much time that saves them.
Yeah,
And
and we actually added a feature because of people that were doing that sort of thing, because you're talking about removing the items that you didn't need. So what a lot
yeah,
of people, what they'll do is they'll bring everything in on a template with a zero quantity for every single item, and then
yep,
they'll go ahead and put in the quantities that they want. And we added a button that you can press that will automatically remove all zero quantity items. So if you
oh
had,
wow,
100
yeah.
items on that quote, and you only put quantities for 5 of them, just like that, you've got your quote ready to go.
That's cool. That's very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Now, you guys have some things coming up. I heard you have PAX 8 integration coming up. Can you share some details on that?
Yeah, so there are very few integrations when it comes to the quoting side integrating with PAX 8 right now. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
Basically, from within QuoteWorks, you're going to be able to quote a new customer any product that you're able to sell from PAX 8. And
Wow.
that's automatically going to be brought into your quote and quote works. It'll sync over to your PSA tool the way it's supposed to, the way that the part numbers are supposed to happen, so you get
Yeah.
that recurring revenue correctly. That was one of those things that took a little extra time, we'll say, learning that how everything worked, because with PAX 8 they do some very, we'll say, interesting things with their part numbers that other distributors do not.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And also, you guys have you rewrote your desktop integration to place orders with Ingram. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Ingram went through a big API overhaul last year. So we totally rewrote all of our integration points with Ingram. So that includes pricing and availability, being able to import quotes from Ingram. And then the last one, which was the big one, was placing those online orders with Ingram. And the big takeaway from being able to do that is when we did that rewrite, kind of like what we did with Halo, we rewrote it in a way that used the same business logic that we could use for both desktop and web. And we're really excited because QuoteWorks Web right now only has very basic and limited procurement capabilities, but now QuoteWorks Web is going to be able to place those online orders with Ingram Micro, and that'll be coming out later this year.
Very cool. For any of our listeners that want to learn more about QuoteWorks, you guys have a special offer, a special trial. Can you share some more details about that?
Yeah, so one, if you're already a QuoteWorks customer and you're interested in any of the integrations that we have, maybe you're interested in being able to send those integrated quotes via Quote Valet, because we don't make that a required subscription. We give out free trials of that, and anyone that actually isn't already a QuoteWorks customer, if you mention seeing us on the stack, or you went out to Everything MSP's website, you'll actually get a free implementation. So we'll get you set up
Nice.
with QuoteWorks from start to finish at no extra cost once you have QuoteWorks.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that for our audience. We
Yeah,
appreciate
definitely.
that. And so you can check out QuoteWorks at quoteworks.com. Of course, you can also, if you're on the Everything MSP website, you can search for QuoteWorks and you can reach out to them directly from there and learn more about them as well. Brian, I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate chatting with you, and hope you have a good rest of your day. And for everybody listening, until next time, we'll talk to everybody soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.